good morning to everyone. How fucking amazing was Catherine's talk earlier, right? Like, that was great. And really, just like the perfect segue into like me immediately speaking after, because I feel very pumped up from it. So the joke has been made, right, like that this is like summer camp for email geeks, right? And so you get really excited to see everybody, and all the Litmus people are kind of like the camp counselors, and maybe you've got a crush on one of them, and but instead of like friendship bracelets, you learn like the drop calc method for responsive coding. I feel like it's probably really important that I establish my credentials up front. I had a BA in English that I've never used once to get a job. I got my first job in email at Emma about 6 years ago because I had built a website in HTML, but like in 2011, you know? So, let's see. Oh, my personal imposter syndrome fear spiral goes something like, okay, so like I'm really anxious about the talk, and I kind of put off making like the presentation deck, and then after this, I'm really afraid like that Justine will rescind my invitation to speak in San Francisco, and that I'll just spend the rest of the time in my room. So I feel like that's probably good to get out there up front, and I also have to pee a little bit. So I'm just gonna be, guys, just gonna be real honest here. We're gonna get real. So I am the design services lead at Emma. I want to offer a little bit of context for that because it kind of goes into what we're going to be talking about. So Emma's got 3 different design teams. One is for UX, so it's the experience of the application. One is our fantastic brand and marketing team. And then my team is client-facing. We're basically like a small agency within Emma that caters to people who use our platform. And so my team gets to work with hundreds, if not thousands, of clients over the time that I've been there, working largely as an extension of someone's existing brand design team, but focusing specifically on email design and specifically design and development for use within the Emma platform. So it puts me in kind of like a really interesting position because I get to see a lot of different design, both designs that are given to us to develop from outside agencies, and then the ones that we do ourselves. So moving on from there, and I know now that every button advances. It feels like you can't lose if every button advances. It's great. So I'm also a wanderer, so I'm gonna do a lot of kind of like this business back and forth. Now from over here is kind of nice too. The good news is that we have an abundance. We live in kind of a golden age of email content. We expanded to 3 tracks at Litmus Live this year. There's so many great webinars and podcasts and blog entries and posts. And so it's kind of a magical time, and especially for one that is so intensely community-fueled as our chosen profession. That's great. The bad news is that there are like so many things out there that it can be really difficult to try and parse and know what's applicable to me, what's applicable to me, my brand. How do I decide what to implement? As Jason mentioned, like I've done some webinars and things largely as a result of having come to speak for the very first time here last year. And then my marketing team was like, hey, you could probably do a webinar. I was like, sure, that's great. Don't feel like a fake at all. That's great. So we, at the kind of the end of these webinars, we often get many questions. So maybe we have something about retail, but we get a lot of questions about like, well, what about me? I'm in B2B. How do I make that happen? The answer to that actually is to go and attend Melanie Kinney's talk about adapting retail trends to B2B a little bit later. Good plug there for you, okay. Yeah. So, and then you also get a lot of like averages and best practices that look a little bit like this quote, which is great. I love Email Monday, but this particular quote about mobile email, will account for 15 to 70% of opens. Feels like it's masquerading as something that's helpful, but like isn't really. It's kind of a frenemy of stats. It's not great because what are you gonna do with that information? It's like somebody telling me like you have a 10 to 100% chance of your own hair strangling you in your sleep. I'm not sure what I should do with that information, really. And that's the difficulty. So I started thinking about, like, so what is it? What are the things that would be the most helpful in knowing what do I use? You know, what do I take from all of this wealth of information? How do I take these things and make them applicable to email design and development and marketing? So this is kind of as much as I can give you in the sense that, like, best practices, industry averages, these things, they're good for pointing us in a direction, right? Like, knowing that mobile can account for a pretty huge percentage of your audience helps us think about, you know, mobile first. It helps us think about responsive design. It's definitely kind of the trend that we're moving toward and been moving towards for a long time now. But it's knowing your audience. It's knowing your subscribers. It's having information about them that really helps you hone in and focus to deliver, like, effective email. It's not a matter of lack of data. We did an email industry report where we surveyed a whole bunch of email marketers over at Emma, and you know, like, only like about 16% said that they didn't have enough data. We're swimming in data. There's so much data. There's big data, there's mildly larger data, I don't know, it's a lot of data. So that's not really the issue. It's knowing what to do with it. It's knowing how to sift through it and get to the good stuff and what's applicable for you. I also get, you know, like, questions from like clients like this one, right? So is center aligned or left aligned text better on mobile? It sounds like an intelligent question, right? Like, it's they want to know kind of a best practice. I was a little confused by the on mobile because to my mind we're kind of conflating two different sorts of data sets about what a best practice is. I also had a brief fear that maybe I had missed. I was really behind the whole on fleek thing. Like, I didn't feel like I was too old to use it, or like I felt like it took me a while to catch up on that. So for a while I've just been dropping on mobile into my regular everyday conversation, just in case, like, it's a trend and I'm not. So I'm just like, how are you doing? On mobile, you know. I suggest you try it. About 50% of the time it gets a laugh. So. But this is really the sort of question that I get often from the hundreds of clients that we work with. And I'm like, this is a little bit confusing kind of two different concepts. And so that's when it started to kind of take shape kind of in my mind, the idea of like, there are these different data sets really that all kind of center around effective email design. But each of those has different considerations. And if you sort of mash them together, it just promotes a lot of confusion. So in this particular instance, right, so center aligned text or mobile or left aligned text it's a design principle. You want to have a consistent place for the reader to start when you're reading text. On mobile or not is pointless. It's not an issue. You want to use left aligned text if you're using body text or paragraph text because you want people to know where to start the next line in a really easy fashion. I don't mean to offend any center alignment folks. I will talk after this. We can, like, go and have coffee, and I'll very slowly and patiently try to argue against it. So as those kind of data types took shape in my mind, I thought about, well, they also sort of, like, embody different personas. There are different sorts of people. Now, I'll be making a few generalizations here. Just as a show of hands, okay, any marketers in the room? Anybody who works, like, on the marketing team? Okay, awesome, that's great. Any designers in the room? Right, some of the same people, right? Any developers in the room? Right, okay, so, and then how many of you wear more than one of those hats? Yeah, all right, so I'm gonna be talking about three different personas. You may embody all three, and that would be great, if not sometimes confusing internally. So in my mind, like, effective email design has these kind of three spheres of data, and I was worried that maybe the point would be missed, so I wanted to make, like, it's in the middle that's the effective email design. And the first of those is subscriber data, right? Like, we're used to thinking about this. And subscriber data is really targeted around, like, the idea of the marketer. The marketer is taking a look at your email lists. You're taking a look at demographic information, right? Like, this is information that your subscribers are providing to you either, like, on your sign-up form on your website, you're sending like a managed preferences email. It's information they're kind of willingly providing about themselves. Or if you have like information, so it's, it's birthdays, it's gender if that's a thing, it's knowing a little bit about their industries, that kind of thing. So this is an actionable set of data. You can do some good stuff with this, right? The second is like behavioral. And that's largely just clicks. It's like the sort of data like that, it's just what is getting clicked on in your emails. And then the third that I see is kind of particularly relevant is relational. So it's like charting out that those behavioral patterns like over time and correlating them with the associated kind of demographic data. So it's seeing like who in your audience of what industry or gender or other ways, like how are they clicking on things, what's piquing their interest, what's getting opens, what isn't. So these all go towards filling out that subscriber data set. Then, and really the functional question that we're like answering with this set of data is like, who is our target audience? What do we know about them? What do we know about specifically the people that we're sending email to? The second data set is what I'm going to refer to as cognitive data. Cognitive data is really, what I mean is just how do we process information? How do we process and take that in? And so that's going to be much more in the realm of the designer. And this, of any of the data sets, provides kind of the most evergreen principles. We know how people process information. We know that people process images 60,000 times faster than they do text. We know like that, we know like to use like contrast and hierarchy, So yeah, so like hierarchy would be one of these kind of data sets where it's always going to be true that you're going to need to clearly chart out how you're going to navigate through a design. You want to make sure that, so like in this instance, we've got text links that are smaller, like they know that maybe they want to click on them, but they really want to drive the direction like down to this main call to action, the view menus now. Then white space. White space is going to be an evergreen principle. We're always going to be fighting other people for white space. For negative space, we always want room around text, particularly for people to be able to like look through it. So again, this is, and then contrast. Now, while there are like a few small variations, like you want to be clear for accessibility purposes to think about things like how colorblind people might see it or other kind of visual distinctions, but contrast is always going to be something that you're going to keep in mind. So in this case, just having that main call to action in that bold red helps set it apart and helps guide the eye to it, right? So this data set is really focused around like, how do we present content effectively, right? So now we've got one set that's talking about like, what do we know about our audience? How do we present this effectively? And then the third being technical data. So this is more the realm of the developer, and it's focused on specs. It's focused on parameters. So it's about device. It's what do you know about the devices that people are opening your emails on? It's having a sense of like what screen real estate you're working with. That's really important. But it's separate from those other two sets of data, really. It's knowing the email client, knowing that breakdown. As a side note, so that 31.6% unknown, I think like render unknown should be like a really nice like email podcast if somebody wants to start it. Kind of maybe it could be like a mystery. I don't know, I'm just spitballing, but I think it could work. We can talk about that afterwards. And it's about support, so support for things like Google Fonts. So it's knowing like what's possible, like in the email. So we've got the three types of data. We've got the subscriber data, like what do we know about the people that we're sending to. And we've got the designer data is like how are we presenting the content effectively. And then we have the technical data, which is like what's possible with what we know from those other things to build. So the traditional workflow resembles kind of a relay race, only it's where the marketer is like, I have this idea of a baton, and then the designer's like, here's this picture of a baton, and then the developer's like, and now I have to build the baton, like, thanks. It's nice, it's linear, it's fairly straightforward, but I think you all know, like that it rarely goes that smoothly, right? Like, is that usually like a smooth process, just handing off clearly like, I've got this idea, then you design it, then you hand it off to the developer, and it doesn't come back with like, well, we can't actually do that, what you designed there, or you go back with a design to the market, and they're like, actually, we're targeting this different audience. So this was kind of the direction that we were at Emma, like in my own team. This is what we did for a while, right? Like, we would work with marketers who are our clients, and we would design something and then have it developed, or they would design something and pass it off to have it developed. But what I found is that it wasn't very efficient, and that it produced a lot of confusion, and no one was really getting smarter off of that. So what I propose instead, and what we've tried to embody a little bit more, is this kind of very collaborative effort where we work closely like with the marketer and the designer and the developer kind of all at once, so that, that was a fun noise that I just made. So we can kind of put these together all at once so that it's an ongoing collaborative conversation. The work still gets done in a fairly linear fashion, but because this is happening at the same time, because it's ongoing, you can avoid a lot of the pitfalls, like designing something that doesn't match the audience that you're trying to reach, or trying to develop something that doesn't work for what we know about their devices and data. It is something that we've actually had like a good bit of success with. So my team, the design services team, is one branch of 3 different professional services at Emma. We also have a strategic team, and we've got a technical team. The technical team focuses on API, sign-up form stuff largely, data syncs. Our strategic folks serve for many of our clients as their email marketers. So again, they work as kind of an extension of their marketing team. And so what we are trying to do is introduce them to the conversation is to have these talks together with the folks on our strategic team when we're designing and developing for our clients. So that's the idea, right? That's the idea of like what that might look like, is to have this ongoing collaborative conversation. I want to jump in to hopefully what I think will be practical knowledge of kind of a brief breakdown of an email and how kind of each portion of that can be led, kind of who we want to defer to in terms of data sets and personas, and what that might look like. So we start with like branding, and then imagery, typography, call to action, and structure. Thinking of that largely as code structure. So with branding, for me, branding, the primary aspect and facet that we need to focus on is branding is about building familiarity. And so you want to create a consistent experience for the people. So the designer really needs to kind of, unsurprisingly, like lead the charge in this part of the conversation. So it's about kind of creating this consistent experience because we want to introduce your brand like into someone's recognition memory. Recognition memory is just about what it sounds like. It's the portion of our brain that like stores information is like, oh, I've seen that before. Probably once upon a time it was our ancestors on a savanna somewhere and being like, tiger tracks, tiger tracks. Probably shouldn't go there anymore. Where's Bob? And so, and you're able to make that more quickly because we've developed that over the many millennia. So branding really is about introducing the visual, like the elements of your like logo and the look and feel of what you're sending into that recognition memory so that people aren't having to waste cognitive space on it. So because you want to engage them with your content, you want to drive them towards taking action. You don't want them wondering, oh, wait, who's this from again? Because I don't recognize that immediately. You want to, it's like you never want to lead with a face tattoo, right? Like if you're, it's, you don't want to walk in, and be like, I don't think I know you, and pretend and walk away. You want to entice them with your regular face, and then show them the new lower back tattoo that you got as the main call to action. So, that was like a really mixed laugh. That was better. Thank you. That would be good. So, so this is a great example, I think. So Frank and Oak. So we've got this isn't even like kind of their primary branding. This is for a special that they were running, but they had this really nice element, the thermometer, and then they also introduced that in the email. So immediately somebody like visits there, they get the email, they're like, oh, I recognize this. So they don't have to waste time on like figuring out if this is something that they had heard about before. They can jump straight to shopping that sale, which is delightful. So the next, of course, big portion of an email is imagery. And whereas the designer is creating that imagery or you're sourcing that imagery, I really think that you're using imagery to create engagement, right? That's the general best practice, is using imagery to create engagement. You don't want your main content as part of an image largely, because people have images turned off again, but that's the general feel to it. But if we want to get specific and what to look for kind of in your own data, you want like your marketer to be able to provide data on that demographic information. So, again, another big general concept is this idea that if you include a human face, we're hardwired to respond to human faces, right? Like, I'm hardwired to respond to each of your faces right now. It boosts engagement, but you want to be able to target that. You don't want to create imagery that doesn't resonate with your audience. So you want to lean heavily in this part of the conversation on that demographic subscriber data in order to help guide those choices moving forward. Then for typography, the first question, so like the general best practice, right, that you might read out in the world is like you want to emphasize like easy parsing of your information. So whatever font you're using, you want to make sure that in blocks, like you can easily kind of take a look at it and read through it. So that's the general practice. But knowing if your actual like audience's email clients support Google fonts or not opens up a lot of possibilities. So kind of for the developer, you want to lead that part of the conversation because that's the first question that has to be answered. And then from there, the designer can go and select like a typeface that really works. But in that part of the conversation, like just knowing if you don't have to use Arial again, or you don't have to use Georgia again, or God forbid Times New Roman. Has anyone used Times New Roman in the room? You don't have to self-identify. Oh, someone in the back right there. It's all right. It's okay. It's a dated font. We're going to talk about it afterwards. Anyway, so this is the main question that you want to answer here. With calls to action, while we know the best practices here, like it's bulletproof buttons. You want to use those instead of images. You want to use clear, actionable language. So, the bulletproof buttons, that's something the dev handles. Clear, actionable language is something that your marketer may handle in like crafting that. But the person who really kind of needs to lead this portion of the discussion is the designer, because again, you want your main call to action to be unambiguously your main call to action. You want them to click there, although you're not supposed to use the term click here anymore. That's also dated, like Times New Roman. See you back there. So placement, and this is something that I see a lot in designs that get submitted to my team to get coded. They may use strong, actionable language. They may be like, just make sure that you're using like a button instead of an image. That's great. But their hierarchy is very confused in the design. And so it's not going to perform well because they're not making that the clear point of focus. We send email largely to get clicks. And so you want to make sure that however else you handle it, that the designer is making that a priority. And then for structure, so there's, keeping mobile in mind is the general best practice. That's what we know from the statistics and from the articles and everything else like that. But that's not going to be true for everybody. And you want to know the actual device and client opens from your audience so that you can make the best use of your available screen layout. I've seen a number of our clients who have a much, much higher desktop open rate, sometimes even 100% desktop open rate, particularly in B2B clients. And so if that's the case, then you don't have to spend an inordinate amount of time focusing on what it's going to look like on mobile if that's not a concern for you. So again, it's about knowing, your developer knowing, like, what are those device opens like? What are the clients that we're sending to? And then, like, making sure that the designer is informed from that information from the developer to make sure that they're making the best use of that space, that they're not designing for something that they're not sending to. So this is the wrap-up slide. I wasn't quite sure where to end it, so I thought, put the graphic again, Logan, put the Venn diagram, but now use different language and have it be something encouraging, so guys, go and start a collaborative conversation. I'd be glad to talk more about this, like the speed dating thing, about how that looks like, what that's looked like for my team specifically. But I would really just encourage you to try doing that in your creative process moving forward. I really appreciate everybody's time. Thank you guys so much.